Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by a good friend of ours, Tristan Freeman, who does such an excellent job over at Bussin' Brackets. We're going to chat with him about the divide that we're seeing between the top teams in college basketball and the rest, some of the good/bad surprises that we've had thus far this season, the strength of the Big Ten and the Big 12. We'll also take a look at the big game that we've got between UConn and Texas for tonight, and then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots, small card but a fun card, and if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we all fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Lars EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today. Everything is powered by Better. That is BETR on Better. Better is making it all the better to be able to get on daily fantasy by making it easier than ever. You just go to BETR.app, you type in the promo code of VSINPOD, VSINPOD, that gets you $10 free, and you're all good to go from there. You just take a look at a player's stat line, you determine whether or not they're going to go over or under, and you're all good to go. And where jurisdictions apply, you're able to get on some money lines, some spreads as well. So let's take a look back at everything that we saw in college basketball on Thursday. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Only one ranked team in action, and Iowa State got themselves quite a tussle from their interstate rival, the Hawkeyes. Iowa State does persevere by a count of 66-62 as they use a 17-0 run from the back half of the first half into the second half to be able to do so, as Iowa was leading for much of this game, and then things were very much on the fritz from there. That was a big run that Iowa State had, powered by Joshua Jefferson, who supplied the team with 24 points, one of the most versatile players in the country. He also had a pair of steals, pair of blocks, 5 rebounds, and for Iowa, they actually do win the rebound battle 31-28. And for Iowa, 7-15 from three-point range. Bennett Sturts with 3 of 8 from the outside. You had 14 points in this one out of Tavion Banks as well. What really did do him, Iowa, in this game is that they did lose the turnover battle by a count of 16-9, and a lot of that was thanks to Tamon Lipsby being able to generate 4 steals, but still, very good effort from Iowa. Iowa State, they do find a way to persevere, get the job done, and not getting the job done was East Carolina. As a favorite, they lose to Appalachian State 67-54, and this East Carolina team continues to be miserable from three-point range. 4 of 20 from the outside. You actually had off the bench a 2 of 3 three-point shooting performance out of Tybo Bailey. That means everyone else went a combined 2 of 17. You did have Jordan Riley supply 26 points, so it was on 23 shots, but East Carolina loses the rebound battle 41-32. And how about Alonzo Dodd supplying 17 points, and Kassan Jennings 20 for Appalachian State. IU Indy, after there was much buzz about this team after their first few games of the season, they have very much been slowed down, and UW Green Bay pulls away in the second half, 85-75. The final for IU Indy really didn't do the world's greatest job on the glass in this one. They lose the rebound battle 39-32, and for UW Green Bay, Marcus Hall, their top scorer, only had 6 points before fouling out. It was all about LeBron Thomas, who came up with 20 points. He only went 3 of 4 from the floor, but went 14 out of 16 at the free throw line. For IU Indy, just 7 of 27 from three-point range. You did have a 3 of 8 three-point shooting performance out of Micah Davis for 17 points. The rest of the team quite cold from 3, and for IU Indy, they're going to need to learn to rebound a little bit better if they're going to be able to pull out some wins. And for UT Arlington, they do pull out a win. They win by a count of 58-50. As I'm doing this, the box score for ESPN did not pull up, but that's for UT Arlington. I can assure you that they turned the ball over quite a bit. Both of these teams were very cold from the floor, but UT Arlington, who's been a top 40 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots, they resulted in an offensive rebound. They did a nice job hitting the offensive glass from everything that I saw to be able to pull that one out. This one was pulled out by Virginia Tech by a count of 96-74 over Western Carolina. This was a overnight number, more around about 19.5, 20.5, so it depended upon your number if you were able to get there or not. But for Virginia Tech, what they did do was bomb it from three-point range. They go 13 out of 27 from the outside, and most places did close this more around 20.5, 21.5, so should have been able to get there if you did have Virginia Tech. But Nicolas Avadeus, 30 big points in this one. He goes 4 of 8 from the outside, and Western Carolina did go go 8 of 20 from three-point range, but Western Carolina also lost the turnover battle in this one by a count of 14 to 11. You did have Marcus Kell give the team 22 points, but other than that, not a lot doing for them. A whole lot doing for North Dakota State, though. They go on the road, they take down the Meat Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunners by a count of 80 to 69, despite going only 6 of 25 from three. North Dakota State, a very different team than they were a season ago when they went bombs away from three and they couldn't generate any turnovers. As for North Dakota State, they win this game by winning the turnover battle 16 to 14. They also won the rebound battle 48 to 37. And for Bakersfield, it's been a pretty miserable season after they had the coaching hoopla that led to Rod Barnes being relieved of his duties. Ron Jessamine had for the team 18 points, but for North Dakota State, Damari Wheeler-Thomas, 21 points on 14 out of 18 at the free throw line for Bakersfield. They put him on the free throw line a lot, and for North Dakota State, they knocked him down 26 out of 37 at the free throw line. The Syracuse defense continues to be stout, not stout enough to be able to get the cover, as for Syracuse, they do win this game, but they do not cover 71 to 63. The final, they are still dealing with a injury to Donnie Freeman. He did not play in this one, but a man that did, William Kyle, down low, 12 points, 11 rebounds for Syracuse. As Syracuse actually loses the rebound battle 44 to 34, but this St. Joe's team is right now ice cold from three. Right now, they're a bottom 25 team in all of college basketball in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. They went 5 of 26 in this game, but you did have Deuce Jones give you a deuce from three-point range, 2 of 7 from the outside. He gave the team 18 points, and for Syracuse, they did a solid job in terms of winning the turnover battle by a count of 14 to 10, so win but no cover for them. And for Missouri, it was a win but no cover for them as well, 85 to 77. Alabama State does a nice job of holding in there, and this one looked like it was going to get away from Alabama State because there was a time in this game where they were down 20 plus points. It looked like they might not be able to cover, and then from there, they were able to go on a nice run, actually approximately 18 points, 72 to 54, with about 9 minutes and change remaining. But Alabama State made a run with their three-point shooting, 13 out of 26 from the outside, with Asjon Anderson, who's been cold from three to begin the season, 5 of 10 from the outside. And off the bench for Alabama State, you had a pair of guys be able to give you double figures, as you had 13 points out of Demarion Yates. For Yates, he goes 3 of 4 from three-point range, and then 11 points, 2 of 3 from three-point range out of Tyler Bird to give the Bird. And Jacob Cruz, he led the way for Missouri, elevated into the starting lineup. He did give the team 20 points. Few injuries of note right now for Missouri, so they've been going through that a little bit, and Javon Porter only 1 minute played in this game, but for Missouri, they do stave off the upset. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we are getting in college basketball right now, overall for the season, the under still leads the over at about 50.9%, 809 unders to 779 overs, with favorites on the spread still hitting at just below 51%, 811, 769, and 26 against the spread. Now, if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, favorites have been hitting at about 52%, 113, 104, and 5 against the spread, and overs and unders are about as 50-50 as it gets. 110 overs, 110 unders, and I believe 1 push along the way. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's where we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Tristan Freeman of Bustin' Brackets right here on Cusco Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. your lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we've got Tristan Freeman aboard. He does a tremendous job over at Boston Brackets, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He's dialed in on so many different things as he is doing a bit of work over at the Field of 68, Sleepers Media. He's based out there in the city of Pittsburgh, so doing a great job looking at all those local teams. And you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Oopsa351. And Tristan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Tristan. And Tristan, something that I've noticed here from the first, we're going to call it month and a half of the college basketball season, is it's starting to become a little bit of a divide between the have and the have-nots. I think most people would agree on Michigan being that top team, though I do think that there might be a case for a team like Arizona, a team like Iowa State, what have you. But just what have you made out of this? Because I feel like those four undefeated teams are in the top four of the polls, really have separated themselves from the rest.
Yeah, I mean, they also have the wins to back it up. I mean, Arizona's wins are obviously some of the best, and then Michigan, what they did in players there, are invitational as well. So I do think right now those four are in a tier. At the same time, UConn's loss to Arizona was without, I believe, Terrace Reed. So if you want to just put the Huskies in that tier, make it a group of five, I think that would be fair too. But yeah, I mean, so far those are the top teams, but even the ones below them, Purdue, Houston, Gonzaga, at Michigan State in their resume. I mean, I think the top tier can be right now 4, but I wouldn't be mad if people wanted to make it a top 8 or 10 because there's still so many teams who have just looked very impressive at the start of the year.
Absolutely, and I don't know if they're necessarily the top team, but I love the fact that you bring up Michigan State because there's always the teams that we always label as teams that you don't want to face, and right now, I would put Michigan State right towards the top of the list because even if you're able to get a win, it just feels like they make every single game sloppy, slow. They just come after you on defense. And for Michigan State, they just feel a little bit different than the rest of the teams with the way that their makeup is and the way that they're just playing with regards to a slow tempo, maybe not shooting it the best from 3, but just finding a way to be able to get the job done, for lack of a better term.
I mean, few would have thought that a team with Jackson Kohler as their top scorer would be top 10 good, but that's what Michigan State's been. It's been another collective effort, with several players capable of giving them 15 to 20 points. Even, the underclassmen like Kurt Tang and Cam Ward have given them big outings in certain games as well. And, their defense is elite, top 10 most metrics, top 10 scoring defense points per game. And they've kept teams like, Duke, way under their scoring average as well. And I think while Michigan and Purdue probably have separated themselves as the top teams in the Big Ten, there's no reason why Michigan State can't be in the mix for it because they're more capable of beating those two teams.
No question about it. As joining me on the show, we do have Tristan Freeman. He does such a great job over at Boston Brackets. Joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I do feel like there's been a little bit of separation between the conferences, with the Big Ten and the Big 12 right now being those top two conferences. I personally am right now in the camp of if you want to put the Big 12 in front of the Big 10 or the Big 10 in front of the Big 12, I'm not really going to argue there, but it feels like the SEC has just taken a step back because you don't necessarily have as many of those top teams, so it's just very competitive from top to bottom. But in the Big 10 and the Big 12, you right now have those top teams and a lot of depth behind it as well.
The one big surprise for the SEC so far has obviously been Vanderbilt, the last unbeaten team left, but I do think the middle and bottom tier has taken steps back. I mean, both Mississippi schools, Mississippi and Mississippi State, have underachieved so far. Obviously, everyone knows about Kentucky. And even other teams, like Oklahoma and Texas A&M, they've been okay, but not as good as advertised. And, Alabama's going to be a contender. I do think Auburn has the pieces to be a threat. Tennessee's solid, but the lack of both Final Four caliber teams and those that should be in the mix to be in the tournament, considering that the conference hasn't, dominated the non-con schedules and overall resumes, I do think it feels like the league has taken a step back. And it was always going to, but maybe it has gone a little bit more of a reverse than maybe we expected.
Yep, I do agree with you there. And anyone that thought that the SEC was going to get like 13 or 14 teams in the NCAA tournament once again, I think that it was a little bit of wishful thinking. But I just feel like the pleasant surprises as well have come from both the Big 12 and the Big 10. A little bit more on the Big 10 side of things because with the Big 12, I feel like the top five teams coming into the year, we expected that they were going to be rock solid and they've been able to back that up maybe just a little bit more with a team like an Iowa State than we were expecting. But out there in the Big Ten, I take a look at Indiana, what they've done, and I've been very impressed. And Nebraska being 10-0 as we do this, I feel like they've been one of the biggest surprises in all of college basketball and might actually be live to win their first ever NCAA tournament game.
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin's a team that, at least I respected in the non-con, but the fact that, Nebraska beat them by 21 and it was not even competitive was obviously very eye-opening. And their team, obviously, Rink Mass is back after missing all last year, and he's been great. Price Sanford, another Iowa transfer. He's been easily the best Iowa transfer for them so far. And then they just get good production from everyone else. They got a solid rotation. Even without Connor Season, who's out for the season, they're still very deep. They can shoot the ball well. And the only concern is that they give up a lot of threes as well, and eventually that could come back to haunt them, because there are some teams in the Big Ten outside, Michigan State, of course, that can't hit it. But, it's working for them. And, yeah, I think at this rate, they're looking to set themselves up, possibly be a top 6 seed in the NCAA tournament, and yeah, hopefully get their first win.
Yep, absolutely. And that's a team that has really stood out to me. Another team for myself, because I know that you do a great job out there in your neck of the woods with a lot of Big East play. You're not too far from the Philly 5 matchups, what have you. And Seton Hall has just really stood out to me because it feels like everyone was picking them dead last in the Big East. I raised my hand. I thought they were going to be dead last in the Big East. Talk to me about Seton Hall and what you've seen out of them, because it feels like the Big East has been a little bit of a mixed bag this year, and really the team that has come out and surprised everyone, because we figured that St. John's and UConn was going to be towards the top, but I feel like Seton Hall has really become a team that can be in that top 3, top 4 when it's all said and done.
Yeah, the case can be made that they should still be unbeaten if it wasn't for that semi-controversial loss to USC in Maui. But they're a team that obviously their defense is going to be elite once again in the Shaheem Holloway system. But they're getting just enough scoring. They're averaging around 76 points against high major teams. And, A.J. Stan-McCray was Miami's 8th best player last year on that disaster roster. And he's come over and he's now leading them in scoring, giving them just enough. Bud Clark has been a really good, effective point guard. And in the interior defense, with Jai Himes and Stephon Payne, has been awesome for them. So they're going to be great defensively. Now if they're just getting just enough on the offensive end, they're going to win more games. With the Big East down overall outside of, St. John's and UConn, I mean, Seton Hall has a chance to rise up very far in the Big East standings, because it's certainly wide open from 3 to 11.
Absolutely, and I've been a little bit impressed by what I've seen out of Butler this year as well. I know that a lot of people were down on them. I like them a little bit more coming into the year, and right now I give myself a little bit of a pat on the back there, but certainly too early to tell on that front, as Tristan Freeman, who does such a great job over at Boston Brackets, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I've brought up a few teams that have been surprises to me in Nebraska and Seton Hall. Are there a few teams that have just really been able to capture your attention and you just feel like have overachieved what you were expecting coming into the season?
Yeah, well, obviously Vanderbilt will be the top answer for everyone, considering that they're not only unbeaten, but they're just dominating teams with their new look roster. I would say Miami is a team that has been a pleasant surprise. Obviously, Jai Lucas in his first year coming over from Duke, and it was a roster that had a good looking starting 5, but you wasn't sure necessarily how it would fit. But, Malik Renew has looked like the all-caliber guy that he was at times at Indiana, averaging 20 and 6. And, the guard duo, Trey Darlington and True Washington, has been good. Shelton Henderson, he's not putting up the absurd numbers the other freshmen have, but he's been fine. And just overall, they've just been solid. Are they a tournament team in year one? We'll see, because there's still things that, are a bit concerning, particularly their shooting at times. But they have the all-ACC guy to work with, and it's a conference that is winnable, but they should be good enough to finish in the top 6. And I think if you do that this year, it should be good enough to warrant yourself a bid. assuming, of course, that you don't, suffer the hiccups along the way.
No question about it. And Tristan, I know that you're out there in Pittsburgh, and I do want to talk a little bit about the Atlantic 10 as well, because for the Atlantic 10, it feels like one of the biggest mixed bag conferences in all of college basketball right now. VCU does take that loss to New Mexico a few nights ago. I think a lot of people will knock them a little bit for the fact that they're 6-4, but they have played an absolutely brutal schedule. Loyola Chicago has been one of the biggest disappointments in all of college basketball. I don't think that anyone can deny that, but there have been pleasant surprises in Richmond starting off 8-1. George Mason and St. Bonaventure have looked relatively solid. Just what do you make out of this Atlantic 10 right now, where there have been some big disappointments, there have been some big surprises, and then the team out there in your neck of the woods, Duquesne, has had one of the biggest tempo shifts in all of college basketball?
Yeah, I mean, Duquesne went from a slow-paced team that couldn't score but defended well to a team that could score but can't really defend well. And I think you're seeing the adjustments dealing with them because they have been vulnerable to teams that can score a lot of points. But we'll see if that, makes them better in league play. I mean, obviously you have teams like St. Bonaventure and Richmond who only have one loss so far, haven't played the toughest schedule in the world, but they're still winning games. And then, obviously Dayton, St. Louis, and VCU are going to be the teams to watch at the top. But I do think it's a fairly deep league overall because GW, even after the surprise loss to Delaware, still has a potent roster. Davidson's been really competitive as well. They've been a really nice surprise. And yeah, Loyola Chicago still has talent. We'll see if they fall on their face or if they pick things up. But they're going to be a team that can play spoiler because the road game at Loyola Chicago is now quad 4. And if you're VCU or Dayton, you cannot afford to lose the games against the Ramblers. And again, they still have talent where they can pull off a surprise or two in league play.
Absolutely. And I think without question, if asked the question for one of the biggest disappointments in all of college basketball, we've already talked about two of the teams Creighton out there in the Big East. And man, it just has not been great for Loyola Chicago to say the least. But has there been another team or two? And I have to throw in there Kentucky because, man, it's not been great for Kentucky as well. That you just take a look at and maybe you were expecting a little bit more from them and maybe they will be able to bounce back, but you just haven't loved what you've seen out of them thus far this season.
Kansas State from the Big 12 of the team that, that they have the star in TJ Haggerty, but for some reason it's not working out as well. I think another team mentioned it earlier, but Ole Miss was supposed to have a really good front court with Malik Dia back, and they bring in AJ Storr, and for some reason it's just not working out. They lost 4 straight games, and Chris Beard's lamenting about the lack of effort, and you don't want to put it on the feet of AJ Storr, but guard play wasn't concerned coming in. He's supposed to be their key guy, and if they can't get these wins in the non-con, losing to Iowa and Utah, it's going to get a lot harder once SEC play comes through. And I am concerned that they're a team that could just fall down the standings.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, it's been interesting to say the least with Kansas State, another team that I feel like is playing a little bit too fast for their own good. And then also out there in the Big 12, man, for Cincinnati, I just don't know why they're playing up tempo. They don't necessarily have the personnel to play up tempo, but they have been. And I do want to get your thoughts on one game that we're going to be seeing on Friday because call what it is. It's not necessarily the most rambunctious slate in the world, but we do have Texas going on the road as UConn. They're going to be a double-figure underdog in this game, but how do you take a look at this matchup with a UConn team that is looking to be able to build up their metrics once again after they were missing Terrace Reed for a few games? They take that loss to Arizona. And for Texas, this has been a team that hasn't necessarily played the most challenging of competition ever since that game against Duke, but honestly did not look bad in that game against Duke. They just didn't get a lot of scoring, and it feels like a Texas team that's starting to find their bearings under Sean Miller.
Texas has a sneaky good front court with FAU transfers Matas Vokiaitis and Dalen Swain, who kind of came over from Xavier with Sean Miller. They're a really good group, and you can add Latina Traore, who's now healthy in the mix too. So they have the front court to match up with UConn's Alex Caravan and Terrace Reed. The question is going to be the backcourt. Jordan Pope and Tremont Mark, have been inconsistent. They're not necessarily the elite scorers, as well as Simeon Wilcher. If those guards can get going, then they have a chance to keep up with the Huskies. But if they struggle and they just get thoroughly outplayed by solo ball and Silas Demary, then it's going to be a very long night for them. And it's an opportunity for them, and again, in the SEC, that's a bit down, for them and Sean Miller to make a statement before league play gets going.
Yep, absolutely. This is a big, giant opportunity for Texas, and that would be big for the SEC as well. If they, I mean, forget about winning outright. If they're able to keep that within like 2 or 3 possessions, I think that that would be big for them. And what's big for this podcast is getting on great guests like you, Tristan. You're doing such a tremendous job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Love to get people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you follow me at Hoopsnut351. You can also follow me at my main site, Bustin' Brackets, among others, for all the latest college basketball news and rankings and etc.
Absolutely, and Tristan is doing such a great job looking at this great game, and every single time he joins me, he learns such great insights. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Up next, I give you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Friday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Tristan Freeman. He does such great work over at Bustin' Brackets, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and did so once again today. So a big thanks to Tristan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81. We've got a very thin slate today. It's going to go with the 3 games with power conference teams: Xavier, Missouri State, Texas UConn, Cal Baptist, and Eastern Washington. The rest involve teams from smaller conferences. Those are going to be at the bottom, and those will be in time order. How about if we get things started with 881, 882? Missouri State is on the road against Xavier. The X-Men have went from being a 14.5 point favorite down to being now a 16.5 to a 17.5 point favorite. 145.5 to a 147.5 is the total, and I did set Xavier here as a pretty sizable favorite of 18.5 points. So even with the rise, I'm still willing to lay it with them. This is Xavier bunch that had a rough go of it to begin the season on offense. They're still about 142nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they have been able to score at least 77 points in each of their last 5 games. So they're doing a rock solid job there. And for the Xavier team, they've been good on the defensive glass. Teams are only grabbing 22.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is top 20 in all of college basketball. And for Missouri State, last year this was a team that was pretty good with their 3-point shooting, but they had a tough time taking care of the ball. They become a top 150 team in terms of their ball security, but their 3-point shooting is right now 27.8%. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of positivity here, as for Missouri State, ironically enough, they're shooting 24% from 3 when they're at home, and away from home, they've been able to shoot closer to 35% from the outside. You are going to be a little bit outgunned if you're Missouri State. Down low, though, even though Michael O.C. Bonoso last year gave the team about 7 boards per contest, he's back there this year. He's only about 6'4", and this team doesn't necessarily have ideal size. You got Darren Sutton along with Mark Vujovic, who both been able to give you about 6 rebounds apiece, but with Xavier not giving up any second and third chances, that makes it difficult on this Missouri State team. And for Missouri State, last year they were outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. This year they're allowing teams to shoot about 42% from 3-point range away from home, and Xavier now up to shooting about 36.5% from the outside. Jovan Milosavljevic has been able to give 12.5 points. He's been able to shoot over 40% from 3. All right, that's his actual name, 11 points, and he's been all right from 3-point range at 47.5% from the outside. Xavier had a little bit of issue with turnovers to begin the season, but have really cleaned it up. They're down to about 9 turnovers per game. That is a top 25 mark in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, so they're doing a nice job keeping it clean. Xavier is starting to play a little bit more up-tempo. They're not necessarily playing at warp speed, though, as right now they're about 110th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Missouri State team that they're about 229th in the country, but having Trey Carroll on their side, caroling all the way to give you 17.5 points, 5.5 boards, I think that that's a big X factor for a team that really makes the most out of their possessions. So I like the over, so I may total 147.5 and want to lay up to 18 here with Xavier. 883, 884. UConn plays those to Texas. Texas is back to being an underdog of 12.5 to 13.5 points. 145.5 to 146.5 is the total. This opened up at a 148.5. Still like the under, though. I set my total at a 144. You do have a Texas team that's doing a great job taking care of the ball. They're 41st in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and if you've got a team that's good at generating turnovers, they're about 60th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but with UConn outside the top 290 in terms of total possessions per game, just a very defense-oriented team, hovering right around about 20th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They now have Terrace Reed back after he was missing for quite a few games to begin the season, 15 points, over 6 rebounds per game, and has really looked back in full force now. That game against Florida, he was able to come up in a big way for them. You still have Alex Caravan, who gives you all sorts of versatility, 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, right now shooting 43.5% from 3, but for UConn, they have been a little bit, shall we say, more rough on their offensive side of things rather than this Texas team. Texas is a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. UConn is more around about 51st, so Malachi Smith finding his sea legs, coming off the bench for 4 assists per game. He's supplying 6 points per contest. Guy that has really been able to guide the ship for the team has been Silas Emery, doing a bit of everything. 10 points, 2 steals, 5 assists per game, and for UConn, they're really cutting teams off and not allowing them to pop it from 3. Teams are shooting less than 27% from 3 against them, but they're also a top 40 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but the way that Texas is taking care of the ball, I think is going to be able to keep them lively, and I do think that we see a little bit of positivity here for Tremont Markle on Jordan Pope. Pope is shooting 37.5% from 3 with 12.5 points per game. It's starting to rebound from. Mark is still below 10 points per game with under 27% 3-point shooting. I think that recovers a little bit more. You've got Medes Volkatatis, who comes over from Florida Atlantic, 16 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and then Lucina Traore, 7 rebounds per game. Texas, as a matter of fact, top 10 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are grabbing less than 21.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Now, Texas is allowing a lot of clean possessions outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I think with the lack of second chances and the way that this thing gets slowed down, you do get an under. And for Texas, I think that they hold in there. Set my line at 12. Won't take those points, and I'm going to be in on the under. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 885, 886. Cal Baptist is on the road against Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington is a home underdog of 3.5 to 4.5 points. 150.5 to 151.5 is the total, and I do like the under. I set my total at a 149.5. You've got a Cal Baptist team that has had a few different tempos over the last few years. I felt like a few years ago they were playing way too slow for their own good. Now they're closer about 240th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and it's year number 2 of Dan Monson over there at Eastern Washington, and they're looking to crank tempo a little bit more. Not at warp speed, but about 122nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And Eastern Washington, a much better 3-point shooting team than they were a season ago, but not as if they're absolutely flamethrowers from 3 at 34.5%. They're about 150th in the country. Isaiah Moses, who's come over from UC Riverside, has been the main man. 3.5 assists, 18.5 points per game. But for Eastern Washington, they still have a turnover issue outside the top 280 in terms of ball security, and they're going to be outgunned down low. This is a Cal Baptist team that has been able to do a great job with Brady Henjai, not necessarily give you a lot of scoring, but he's a true 7-footer that's able to give you over 5 rebounds per game. It is the Eastern Washington team that's outside the top 200 with regards to their overall rebound percentage, while Cal Baptist, top 30 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, over 15.5 offensive rebounds per game, top 50 team in terms of overall rebound percentage. One thing that Cal Baptist has had an issue with is 3-point shooting 31.1%, but Eastern Washington, last year they were outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They're allowing teams to shoot over 40% from 3 this year. That should see a little bit of positivity, but so should the Cal Baptist 3-point shooting of 31.1%, as Martell Williams, how he does it is give you 15 points, 5 boards, shoot 34% from 3. Dominic Daniels, team's on score, 19 points per game, 4 boards, 4 assists. He doesn't even necessarily shoot it well from 3, but I do think that someone like a Jane Jackson is going to be able to step it up a little bit more if he's able to get it back out there on the court, because he's been dealing with a little bit of injury, probably going to be out once again for this game, but I mean, he was a guy that last year over at Northern Arizona was a mid-30s 3-point shooter, but even if you have him out of the fold, the guy that has been able to step up in the interim has been Jordan Mueller, who's giving you about 7.5 points per game, shooting over 40% from 3, at least 8 points in 4 out of the last 5 games, so in his absence, he's done a very nice job in terms of being able to step up and might actually be a little bit of an upgrade. And then you've got Thomas Endong, who's giving you about 7 boards per contest. I think that Cal Baptist going to do a good job of being able to win from within. I think that Eastern Washington just gets a little bit too sloppy with the ball. And keep in mind, Cal Baptist, even though this team does do a lot of things very well, they are outside the top 275 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, but I think that defense is enough to cover. I set my line at 5.5. I'm willing to lay the number here with Cal Baptist, and I'm in on the under. Now we get the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-605 5 through 6-6-0-6. You've got UMBC, and they play also Army, and Army is an underdog of 6 to 7.5 points total on this game, 145.5 to 146.5, set a total of 145.5. So at the 146 plus, I am in on the under. You've got a UMBC team that is starting to play a little bit faster, but still, they are way down with regards to their tempo from where they have been in the past. For UMBC, in terms of total possessions per game, this team is checking in 217th in all of college basketball, and it's an Army team that they love to shoot it from three as a mid-tempo team, about 200th in terms of total possessions per game, and right now for Army, they are number one in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three. They are attempting over 54% of their shots from the outside, but as of right now for Army, they're outside the top 270 with their three-point shooting percentage, shooting less than 30% from distance away from home, and for UMBC, overall, they are outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but at home, that percentage goes down to 31%. For Army, you've got Ryan Curry, give you about 5 assists, 13.5 points per game, but outside of that, there's just not a lot helping him out, as out of their top 5 scorers from a season ago, he's the only one that returned. Now, Jackson Furman, Jason Holloway are both give you about 10.4 points per contest, but you don't have a single guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. Tate Lakowski has been able to give you approximately 5 rebounds, 4 points per contest, but it's a very thin rotation for this bunch, and for UMBC, they have been a little bit fragile on the glass, but getting back Josh Odawando, who he does fall a little bit too much, but he does come in from Columbia. He's been able to give you a little bit of a rough and tumble down low, as he's supplying 9.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. That's a big help for a UMBC team that they've been able to do a solid job of not allowing a lot of second and third chances, but they're outside the top 3 in terms of percentage of their own missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound, but you do have Ace Valentine. He has been the ace in terms of facilitating this offense. 10 points, 5 assists. He's right now shooting 45.5% for 3, while turning the ball over less than 2 times per game. Now UMBC outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers, but they also don't put you on the free throw line. Top 30 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed per possession, and with this UMBC team, I do think that they do a nice job of stifling an Army team that just really doesn't do a great job down low. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a controlled game with an Army team that has been outside the top 225 in terms of ball security. I'm willing to lay up to 9 with UMBC, set them as a 9.5 point favorite, and like the under, semi total 145.5, 306-607, 306-608. Maryland Eastern Shore is on the road. They're facing off against North Carolina A&T. A&T does find themselves as a favorite of 7.5 points. 130.5 to 132.5 is the total, and I did set a total here of a 137. I do like the over. For Maryland Eastern Shore, it has been a brutal year on offense. They are currently dead last in the country in possessions that end in a turnover on offense, and for Maryland Eastern Shore, well outside the top 340 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but reason to believe that things are getting a little bit better for them. I'm not saying that it's amazing or anything like that, but they have been able to pass the 60-point plateau in now 3 out of their last 4 games. As a matter of fact, 4 out of their last 5 games, and they have found a little bit of a go-to scorer. Joseph Lucardo, who's been able to give you about 12.5 points per contest. It's a Maryland Eastern Shore team that has not been the world's worst team on the glass. They are outside the top 200 in terms of rebound percentage, but I do think that they're going to be able to do an okay job in this circumstance. Now, for North Carolina A&T, what is big is that their number 2 scorers back in the fold, as for 3 games, they were missing. Luron Walker has been able to give you 16.5 points per game. Hasn't quite looked like himself since coming back, but still he's averaging 16.5 points per game for a North Carolina A&T team that they've been pretty good on the defensive glass. They've been a top 125 team in terms of rebound percentage, but this is going to be a team that's probably going to be built a little bit more around their offense. They do need to tame down on the turnovers. They've been outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but what this team is doing a great job of is getting to the free throw line. If you include games against non-D1 competition, they've been a top 5 team in terms of free throw attempts per game, as they're attempting over 30 free throw attempts per contest. Lewis Walker has been rock solid, being able to supply 18.5 points, and you've got Trent Middleton, who comes over from Delaware. He's been able to shoot about 39% from 3-point range, but this is a Maryland Eastern Shore team that has been a top 250 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I do think that they're going to be able to exploit the fact that you've got a A&T team that has been turning the ball over a little bit too much, and this has been a Maryland Eastern Shore team that has been pretty solid around the perimeter. Top 150 team in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. They've got guys that are doing a nice job on the glass by committee. Zion Obalana has been able to give you 7.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Christopher Flippen last year was a 5 rebound per game guy, down to about 6 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. You've got an AT team that is relatively mid-tempo, hovering right around about 170th in terms of total possessions per game. Maryland Eastern Shore is outside the top 300 with that regard, but this is a Maryland Eastern Shore team that they should get to the free throw line a little bit more in this game. Currently, they're actually dead last in the country in terms of free throw attempts per game, but it does feel like this Maryland Eastern Shore offense is starting to get a little bit better. They're going up against an A&T team that's outside the top 130 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so I do think that you get a little bit more scoring in this game, and I do think that for Maryland Eastern Shore, their kryptonite of having so many turnovers, it's not really going to be exploited by an AT team that has not necessarily been the world's greatest in terms of generating turnovers themselves. So this is a circumstance where I did set my line at 3. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Maryland Eastern Shore, and I do like that total over. I set my total at a 137. 3 is 6-6 and 9, 3 is 6-6 and you've got Queens NC, and they play OSU South Carolina State. South Kakalaki State finds themselves as 15.5 to 16.5 point underdogs. 156.5 is the total. I'm willing to lay with Queens NC. I did set them as a 17.5 point favorite. You got a South Carolina State team that's been dreadful on defense, to say the least. For South Carolina State, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are 345th in points allowed and 357th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. 39% of opponents' missed shots become an offensive rebound. Now, Queens NC is going to allow some second chances as well. They're 295th. 33% of opponents' missed shots are resulting in an offensive rebound. And I will say this for South Carolina State. At the beginning part of the season, they were a little bit short-handed, and they've been able to get a bit of a shot in the arm from Cameron Clark, the transfer from Cal State Bakersfield. Meet for the Roadrunners. He's been their top rebounder with 9 points, 5 rebounds per game. The first 3 games of the season, and they were missing James Merrill for a little bit of time, one of the few guys that comes back from a season ago. You've had Christopher Parker out there for a limited amount of time. He's been able to supply about 7.5 points per game, but he's only been able to play in 4 games this season. He just returned to the lineup, so you should get a little bit more out of South Carolina on the offensive side of things. They're still well outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as Owen Bronson Jr. has been a nice go-to scorer, 12.5 points, shooting 39% from 3, but there's just not a lot around him. And for the South Carolina State team, they're outside the top 3 in terms of ball security with over 15 turnovers per game, but what is really concerning is the fact that they are also a bottom 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and that's where they're going to be eaten up. This is a Queens NC team that has actually been a top 65 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You'll look at home, they are number 8 in all of college basketball. They're shooting a ball from 3-point range at about 37.5% from the outside, top 75 mark, but the top 75 mark in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, I think is a little bit more sustainable. They only have one guy that's able to give you more than 4.5 rebounds per game. That'd be Nasir Mann, top scorer, 15 points, 6 boards, 2.5 assists per game, but I think that you're going to get a little bit more moving forward out of Gus Larson, who began his career over at Cal. He's been able to give you about 5 points, 3 boards. He's actually able to pop it from 3 in the mid-30s. Carson Schwieger has been able to shoot 45% from 3-point range, and then Avante Parker has been able to up his game as well. He was a starter over at Georgia Southern, where he gave the team 4+ rebounds per game 2 years ago. This year, 10.5 points, 4 boards. He's now shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. It's a Queens NC team that in the past had a big-time issue with regards to turnovers. They've really tamed that down to about 12 turnovers per game, and they allow their opponents to have clean possessions. Queens NC outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so there's going to be clean opportunities for South Carolina State, but for Queens NC, they're just so efficient on offense. I do feel like they find a way to be able to get the job done in a nice scoring expose. So my total 161.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 17 with Queens NC. 3-6-6-11, 3-6-6-12. Austin Peay plays host to East Tennessee State. East Tennessee State, 2.5 to 3.5 point road favorites. 142.5 to 143.5 is the total. And for Austin Peay, I made them 1.5 point favorite. I do like them outright on the money line. The Governators, they've been solid on defense. 85th in the country in terms of points per possession allowed, 59th specifically in home games. And East Tennessee State is now a top 80 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Not really pushing tempo, about 230th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Austin Peay was super slow last year. This year, they're a little bit more of a mid-tempo team, about 149th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But I do like this total under because, for one, you've got an East Tennessee team that they don't allow a lot of second chances. They're at 36th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Fewer than 23.2% of opponents' missed shots become an offensive rebound. This is despite the fact that they don't have a single guy that gives you more than 5 rebounds per game, but they're doing it by committee. 4 of their top 5 scorers give you at least 4.2 rebounds per game. You're bringing Brian Taylor from SIU Edwardsville, 13 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, doing it all, shooting 36% from 3-point range. Cam Morris, who comes over from UMass contest low. Right now, shooting 60% from three. That'll be going downward, but 14.5 points, 4 boards per contest. Blake Barkley, it's been a nice find. 12 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Jordan McCollum, 9.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. So they do a great job there. This has been a team that's had a little bit of tough time with regards to ball security, though, about 178th in the country. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, Austin Peay is a top 60 team. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and to the credit of East Tennessee State, they're also a top 50 team in terms of generating turnovers. So I do think that you get a lot of sloppy Joe's possessions here. That said, for this East Tennessee team, they are going to be a team that is going to be looking up on the ball down low. They've been a top 55 team in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, but Austin Peay, even though they might not have that just absolute dominator down low as of right now, I feel like Rashad Marshall, just game by game, is getting better. He over at Arkansas State last year was averaging 6+ rebounds per game, got off to a really slow start, but now he's been able to give the team at least 5 rebounds in each of the last 5 games. He has put up 11+ points in each of the last 5 games, so after that slow start, I don't know if he was dealing with an injury or what have you, but he has really been able to blossom for the team. Tate McCubbin, he's been able to give you 13.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Colin Parker, 15.5 points, 5.5 boards. So we've got a lot of guys that by committee are doing a nice job on the glass for this Austin Peay team. Austin Peay is only allowing their opponents to shoot about 30% from three. That's a top 100 mark in all of college basketball. Could use a little bit more of Anton Brookshire. He's been a little bit of a disappointment, 5.5 points, shooting less than 30% from three-point range, but I think that Austin Peay does a nice job in terms of winning the turnover battle in this game with the way that they're able to lock it down from the perimeter. I think that this is going to be a sloppy game for both, that Austin Peay finds a way to pull out on their home floor. I set my line at 1.5. I like Austin Peay out of the money line, and I'm in on the under, and we wrap things up with 306-613, 306-614. McNeese plays host to East Texas A&M. East Texas A&M currently an 18 to an 18.5 point underdog, 139.5 to 140.5 is the total, and I set East Texas A&M as a underdog of 18.5 points. So 18 is my max lay on McNeese, but I'm going to be willing to lay it for this East Texas A&M team. They've actually been good at generating turnovers. They are currently 75th in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Unfortunately, McNeese is even better. They are number 2 in all of college basketball. For East Texas A&M, the three-point shooting is much better this year. Last year, they were awful, outside the top 320 with that regard. This year, they're shooting 35.5% from three. Ronnie Harrison, who's come over from Tarleton, he's been able to give you 15 points, 5 boards, shooting 36.5% from three to lead the way. But G&I Hunt, he's so old. He was on that Elite 8 Oregon State team of the COVID 2020-21 season. So he's been in college basketball longer than Van Wilder. He's right now giving you about 4.5 assists to 1.4 turnovers per game. So it's been more efficient for East Texas A&M. Not that they're an amazing offense, but back well above the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, unlike a season ago. But this team, I do fear, is going to be a little bit vulnerable inside, as for East Texas A&M, they just don't set up second chances for themselves. 351st in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. McNeese, meanwhile, they're a top 70 team with this regard, and even though this is a McNeese team that's relatively slow and controlled, they're about 260th in terms of total possessions per game. East Texas A&M, very mid-tempo team, about 191st in terms of total possessions per game. I just feel like those second and third chances are going to reign supreme for this McNeese team, a team that only shoots about 32.5% from three, but you've got a trio of guys give you 13 plus points per game. Javon Garcia is a holdover from last year, shooting 45% for three with 13 points per game. Tyshawn Archie comes over from Tulsa, 13.5 points, 3 assists, shooting in the mid-30s from three. Larry Johnson really doesn't give you three-point shooting, but 16 points, 4 boards per contest. Gawari Duel has been a do-it-all guy, a former top 50 recruit. He played over in the Big East last 2 years, 9.5 points, 2.5 steals, 4.5 assists, so he's doing a nice mixer and shaker. And DJ Turner-Up-Richards, he's a holdover from last season. He's shooting over 40% from three-point range as well. It is an East Texas A&M team that has a little bit of a tough time being able to guard the three-point line, and I do think that allows this McNeese team to be able to go out there and dominate this game. Did set a total of a 140.5, so seeing that 139.5, I do like the over, and for McNeese, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 18 with them, and that'll wrap things up for the Friday edition of Gus Seeps, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to our good friend Tristan Freeman, who does amazing work over at Boston Brackets. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Gus Seeps, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep them on RCM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, giving you guys picks and analysis on every game, every day. So I'm back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.